Good afternoon. This is Professor Amina Al-Din for Muslim Network TV and the program Critical Talk. For those of you who were with us yesterday, you know we started talking with Face Together, and we talked about very sensitive issues on those in authority abusing either financial abuse, sexual or physical abuse pertaining really to kids in school and spiritual abuse. And today I am honored to have with me Dr. Denise Berte, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the last name right, a licensed clinical psychologist in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and the state of Palestine for over 25 years with a specialty in trauma. And I think all of us got a little bit of trauma, um, interpersonal violence, and indigenous populations. She began her career working on Central American refugees. Oh, this is great. On the Arizona border at the as the coordinator of Casa Compañera.
Compañera.
Yep. I'm taking Spanish, by the way. I'm working on it. With a liberation theology perspective as part of the sanctuary movement. This is so outstanding. She has previously served as the Director of Children and Adolescent Services at Community Behavioral Health in Philadelphia, the Executive Director of the Liberty Center for Survivors of Torture, the Vice President of Latin American Community Center in Wilmington, I'm assuming that's Delaware, as the Clinical Director of an Najab Child Institute, and as a professor in the medical faculty at the Najab National University of Palestine. Needless to say, salams and welcome.
Walaikum assalam.
Oh
Thank
my
you so
God,
much.
getting you. I don't know what to say. I mean, the expertise I am running into doing this program has just floored me. And some way or the other, I've got to get all of you in a webinar because people need to know what it is you're doing, how it is
Absolutely.
you're doing. So tell us about peaceful families.
Yeah, because somehow that did not get in that bio, which is way too long and fussy. I am currently, but also because I'm still a professor, through the magic of Zoom and electronics. I'm also right now the executive serving as the with great honor, serving as the executive director of Peaceful Families Project. Peaceful Families Project is an NGO here in the United States that looks at domestic violence with an Islamic perspective, really focused on prevention of domestic violence and the promotion of positive family functioning for Muslims in the United States. And we do that through community training. We do that through the building of curriculums and resources. We do that through research, having Muslim researchers and Muslim voices in research, and then also through strategic alliances through our partner organizations, one of whom is Manavdi, which is the Muslim Advocates Network Against Domestic Violence.
Wow. So, what made the group of you think of peaceful families? What was happening? What spurred it?
Well, Peaceful Families actually has been in existence for over 20 years. Our founding members really looked around their communities, their Muslim communities, and said, there's all of this discussion of domestic violence in the more in Christian and other kinds of communities, but within our community, we don't talk about it. We don't share about it. We pretend that it doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we had the reputation of, because of the way that Islam is portrayed in the media, that it was our Islam that was the problem, right? That it was our Islam that was promoting domestic violence. And it started out talking with Muslim women and Muslim men, because we know that there are victims on both sides of that balance, and really recognizing that there is domestic violence in all of our communities, and B, the answer to domestic violence was not to move away from Islam, but to move into Islam. Because when we look at the Quran, when we look at the Hadith, when we take our Sunnah, we have an amazing model of positive family interaction. Our Prophet, peace be upon him, was the best example of what a positive family, what a really an enlightened partner can do to a family. So it was really important for peaceful families to say, not only do we have to recognize that we need to talk about the fact that there are issues of domestic violence within our community, that some of our cultural and ethnic traditions have enhanced that difficulty, and that the answer is not becoming more westernized or moving away from Islam, but really moving deeper into our deen, moving more deeply into the Quran, and really understanding the message of liberation and the message of mutual respect and consultation, and the message of sakina, the message of peace that is within our beautiful, wonderful, perfect, sacred traditions as they were written.
Well, let me throw a little ratchet in there.
Go right ahead.
Many of our ethnic communities belong to families which are in some of the most war-torn areas of the world, whether they're Syrians or, I don't know, Somalis or uh, Turkish families, even, South Asian families, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, Palestinian families. So all of those things come to weigh on the hearts and minds of folk who are sitting in communities here, especially when you come up with, probably before COVID, uh, interventions in preventing people from sending money home. And then COVID happens, and people are stopped at airports where, some folk had relatives who were coming to the US for hospital care. Um, and during COVID, there's been a real shutdown on the ability to send money home. But on the other side, the loss of jobs and then instabilities has created a horrible scenario for people when they could even being able to send money home. So, in the calculations of mediation with domestic violence, I think our community is somewhat probably not the only unique community in that, but with so much weighing on you and the direct responsibility for relatives, how do we mitigate?
Well, and I think there's a difference. And it's funny, we had an interview earlier this week, and I think there's one is to make clear that there's a difference between, words said in anger and frustration and all of those kinds of things, and a real system of a domestic violence.
Okay.
And in the real system of domestic violence, there is an inherent belief that one of us has rights and one of us doesn't, and that somehow that is culturally or religiously ordained. And that's really where our focus is getting at that belief. The idea that marriage is about submission, and marriage is about, and families are to follow, one head. Which we know sometimes the words of our sacred books are misused in that way. What you're talking about, absolutely. So that families are stressed, and that they're living with systematic racism, they're living with Islamophobia, they're living with immigration regulations that are unjust, and they're living with the horrific colonizing violence from their communities of origin. All of that is true. And all of those things are important. However, we also can't, close our eyes and our mouth to the fact that we also have some pockets of folks within our faith tradition that would say, but the man is the man, and you should be 5 steps behind, and all of those things really do still exist. So we have to do both things. We have to recognize the systems in which our folks are living and moving, but we also have to accept the responsibility that some, not unlike other religious traditions, some of the really powerful movement that Islam made toward the equality of women, the equality of all people, can be and has been sometimes hijacked and created into something else, where there is systems of oppression. Now, the beautiful thing about being Muslim is we know by definition that if it's about oppression, that if it's about power and control of one person over another person in an unjust way, that it is not part of our tradition. That is not who we are as Muslims. But unfortunately, not only has sort of the Western media portrayed Islam in that way, so sometimes we have to even re-educate our young people to say, no, that's not what we are. But we also know that, unfortunately, because of those very strong roots of oppression against women and injustice, that some of that trickled down into some of our cultural practices. So we really do need to confront that and to talk about it as well.
Well, you've raised 2 questions in my mind. One was, I was called in as an Islamic legal expert on a case in Minnesota a few years back, where what the U.S. government had done was the Somalis it had brought over to the United States. And this was interesting. Somalia is not a cold country, but they positioned these Muslims in Lewiston, Maine, which is cold, and in Minneapolis, which is also cold. But then one of the things that happened was the government and businesses made sure they hired women
Right.
and not men,
Agreed.
changing the family dynamic,
Dynamics.
just as COVID has done in many
Absolutely.
instances. The other part of that is, can we continue to blame on the West what we ourselves do? It's one thing to say, I have this perfect religion. Nobody practices it, however. But there is this perfect religion out there where this, that, and the other happens. But we all do cultural stuff.
Exactly. And I'll talk to both of those things. So one, absolutely, we do know that our folks, especially new immigrants coming to the United States, are put in situations, and we know that domestic violence is higher in immigrant communities, no matter whether they're Muslim or not, than in non-immigrant communities, for exactly the things that you're saying. One is that we had kind of a set of gender roles that worked at home, wherever home was,
Right.
because of economics, because of the way that work and work outside of the home and childcare and all those things worked. So we had these kind of sets of gender-based activities in the home that worked, and they worked at home, and they were not based on oppression. They were based on what made sense, right? It made sense within that particular. Some of them may have come from oppression, but a lot of them were just practical. It just made sense. And then we came to the United States, and we were forced into roles, and we were also watched. Not only our wives, but our children. Like, oh, I know when you have that thing on your head, that means you're oppressed, and people are sort of like waiting for that and looking for that. And absolutely, we will have more tension and violence more tension and conflict within the home, because we're really having to recreate, and without our communities, right? So at home, when somebody gets out of line, we have an uncle or we have an auntie or we have a mom come in and straighten those things out and talk to people and work things through. But here we have folks under horrific amounts of, first of all, trauma from country of origin, because we didn't leave home because we wanted to. Then we get plopped down, and those decisions, unfortunately, under refugee resettlement get made based on where they need workers, not where people are going to feel the most comfortable, right?
Right.
And then we plot people in the middle of a culture that is not particularly welcoming, where they don't have the familial and community ties, and where they feel like, as many of us have throughout the past, 6 or 10 years, really a focus of a target of hatred because of Islam, right? So all of those things definitely are going to lead to families that are disjointed and have conflict. And then on top of that, there are very few places for them to go where they can get either in their language of origin or a religiously friendly explanation or counseling service, right? Where you're going to go to someone who is not from your culture, who is not from your language, who is not from your religion, and they're, going to give you their perspective of. And Western, we do know that Western remedies do not always work. They're not created for particularly our community. In just a practical sense, I was about 2 years ago in Palestine. We had a huge grant come through around domestic violence, and it was to teach doctors to recognize and report domestic violence. There were literally millions of dollars spent on this. And the interesting thing is, first of all, our doctors already know that you don't need $1 million training to tell you what domestic violence looks like. But there is also no one to report it to. We do not have the social service or legal system there. We have not been able to create it because of occupation and other kinds of things. So it was money that was absolutely al-fadi. It was completely wasted. It made no sense. So we cannot always take solutions from one community and place them on another. So that's part of our difficulty. Now, at the same time, I agree with both of your points, right? Which is, we can't blame the West. We can't blame outsiders for it all. We know that a lot of times, and again, I do think, some of that had to do with early colonization. Some of that had to do with, other kinds of stressors within countries of origin, where women really became marginalized. And the words, the power that is in the Quran got watered down and became something else, right? And so part of our job now is to reclaim that and to say, no, none of us are perfect, and all of us read the Quran and the Hadith through our eyeglasses of our race, our ethnicity, our language, our gender, all of those things. But there are words in that in our Quran that are unmistakable. Right? Yeah. The goal of, I brought you together to create peace, sakina, right? Mm-hmm. The goal of marriage, there is nothing in the Quran that says the goal of marriage is to have 7 children, most of them sons. There is nothing in the Quran that says it's our job to build big, beautiful houses. Yeah. There is nothing in the Quran that says, it is our job to take care of our in-laws, to make sure that all of our in-laws are happy. That is what's in the Quran as the goal of marriage, is to create peace. That we were given to each other to be garments. Garments that keep you warm, that adorn you, that make you happy, that are soft and warm and cozy. And those are the words of the Quran. Right? So we need to really get back to that conversation, right? And to say, okay, we have those outside forces, and we choose not to follow them in other things. Why are we choosing to follow them in this way, right?
I'm going to take a quick break here. And you're welcome to drink your tea, your coffee, your water. I am certainly going to drink my coffee because it's cold here in Chicago. And we'll be right back. This is Professor Aminal Dean, and I'm with Dr. Denise Berte, and we are talking about peaceful families, which makes us have to talk about domestic violence. We'll be right back.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an Imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Good afternoon. This is Critical Talk, a production of Muslim Network TV. And I am having a ball talking with Dr. Denise Berte. Is that the way you pronounce your last name?
Mm-hmm.
Berte. And we're talking about peaceful families. Whole Peaceful Families organization is trying to create out of families in trauma. And I want to go back to a couple of things. One is, in your CV, you're talking about working with Latin American families. I am so thrilled. There are few Muslims who work with Latin American families. And so tell me about that.
Well, and you'll be happy to know that I came to Islam in as a revert. So actually, my family is from Guatemala. Spanish is my home language. And so my work started in that way. And really, it was interesting for me because I did start with a background in liberation theology. Through the sanctuary movement and the work with refugees from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua during the time of the U.S. interventions and wars in Central America, and had a wonderful faith tradition of people standing up for peace in the face of, speaking truth to power, which is, I didn't know I was Muslim at that time. That was something I discovered later. But yeah, so that's how I started. And to be honest, though, right now, we have so many reverts from the Latino community becoming Muslim and engaging in Muslim families, which is another area of delicacy in terms of really teaching those women, because a lot of women who are marrying into Islam do not understand what their rights are, do not know what women in Islam have as part of our legacy, as part of our birthright, right?
Well, but they're also buying into what they can see as similar cultures of male patriarchy.
Well, not only of male patriarchy in that way, but also, there are similarities within our culture. They are family oriented. Mm-hmm. They are communal. They are spirituality is part of everyday life as opposed to something you put in a box. So there are beautiful things about that. But unfortunately, there is also the patriarchy piece, and there is also unfortunately, a lot of women are not getting Islam on their own, right? So they're getting the Islam that the husband or the mother-in-law or whoever is translating to them per their convenience, because we are all human, right? So a lot of our, some of our work as well is reaching out to, we work with the full spectrum of Muslim communities. In fact, I'm so excited. On our website, we have workshops in Arabic, in Yoruba, in Urdu, in Spanish, in, in Malay, hopefully, inshallah, coming up soon. So we work with this whole range of folks, but we do know that within cultures, when you move from one culture to another or from one religion to another, a lot of times the interpretation of what you get is a little bit different. So one part of our work is really teaching Muslim women how to use the tools that we have, right? We have marriage contracts for a reason. They were created for us. So
but
that
nobody uses them. The women are terrified to put something in the contract that they think will prevent them from getting married.
Unfortunately. And as you know, as a Muslim scholar, that's where our power is. We are different from any other faith tradition in that we have a written contract that you as a partner, as a female partner, signs, right? That is really that was meant to protect your well-being from the humanity of the person you were marrying, who is neither Allah nor our Prophet, peace be upon them, right? So we need to work with those tools. And that's another piece of what we do. At the same time, we recognize that we want marriages to work. We want families to be peaceful. We want children to grow up in knowing that being Muslim is about standing up to oppression. It's about having an identity that you feel comfortable in. So a lot of our work is on relationship building as well as teaching, those different traditions, how to talk with each other, how to live with each other, how to listen to their children, how to create positive boundaries that are not oppressive.
Well, how do we say, for example, two things in what you just said. Women coming from cultures where they're not the main breadwinner, how do they reconcile? Because many of us have been to court too many times where women's major angst is, I can't support myself. Mm-hmm. And I can't support myself, which means he will take my children. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, how do we bring the children along in therapy so that they will see that what has happened, you got to cast blame because blame is due where it's due, but that things are getting better.
Right. And I think both of those things are really important. One is that, of course, this is always about, and a lot of our work is not just about marriage, but about gender roles in Islam, right? In saying that the idea that Muslim women should not be educated, all of those kinds of things are cultural. They came cultural and colonial. They came much later. In the Quran, we know that decisions were made by mutual consultation, and that the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, were men and women of a whole variety of colors and shapes and sizes, right? So we do know part of it is re-educating women to say, so this was not the way it was supposed to be, and then talking about how do we get that in our communities? How do we ensure? And part of it is cultural, and part of it is economic, and part of it is, there are all sorts of obstacles to women's education, not only cultural ideas. So we need to open up those lanes so that women feel comfortable being educated. And in fact, we did an amazing study in Palestine where we found that the best predictor of a child's development at age 5, the best predictor, more than money, more than where they lived, more than if they were in a refugee camp, was the education level of the mother.
Right.
Because if you want smart, educated, successful kids, then you educate moms. That's where they come from. So using those kinds of real data, those kinds of research to educate communities to say, what you want is an educated mother for your child, right? Number one.
But there's also that fear that if the woman gets educated, she's going to become too secular, and she might even become a feminist, or she might even become one of those other isms.
Right, exactly. Well, and it's funny, I did a whole talk at a masjid a little while ago where we said, like, I'm sorry to let you guys in on this, but Islam is it's a feminist religion. Like there's a lot of, not feminism meaning we are better than, but feminism meaning we are equal to, and that is in and out and all around our sacred book. So if you are not ready to accept that, you're going to have some trouble with Islam in general. So there is part of that. And I think fear, we meet fear with positive experience, right? We have people see really what having educated moms and daughters and mothers and sisters and all of those kinds of things are. And that is a big piece of it. And we also kind of have to talk about that this was always culture. This was never deen. This was never.
But how do you separate if there is an Islam out there and nobody's practicing it? What does that say?
That real Islam is radical and scary, right? And to reclaim it is an act of joy and liberation and courage, to live as a real, and that's our tradition. That's always been our tradition. Yeah. Sometimes we've forgotten it, but that's always been our tradition. And that's what we do. So we spend a lot of times, we do actually a lot of our work is around educating imams themselves. Because unfortunately, those are human beings that are there to guide us, but may not have gotten the best guidance themselves. So we do a lot of work with, and they're also asked to do, especially in immigrant communities, asked to be everything, mother, father, grandfather,
right.
Interpreter, vocational coach.
And instead of saying, no, I can't do this, let me refer you to those who are skilled at this. When I was talking with Face Together yesterday, we have imams unskilled, uncertified, who are trying to play roles that they're not trained to play.
Absolutely. And part of our job is to be there for them as mental health professionals and as advocates to say, so let me, and this is one of the things that we do. So we do an annual national training for imams to be able to take them away from their place where people are calling them and, they are extraordinarily overutilized, to take them away to a quiet place. And to talk about, so this is domestic violence, this is what it looks like, this is the reality, to have them talk to other imams who are experts in the field of domestic violence, but also then to introduce them to the service providers in their areas, right? To be able to say, so this is the shelter number, and this is the, victims crimes advocate number, and this is the therapist number, and to know, and to remind them that we all want peaceful families within our community. That's really the goal. But we are given a whole variety of answers Quranically, right? So our instruction, when we see someone in our community that we love doing wrong, even to oppressors, what are we told? How do you stop oppressors? You tell them the truth so that they can stop. You remind them of who they are so that they can stop the oppressors.
And if they don't, then what do you do?
And then if they don't, then, they have their, and Allah knows best, and Allah is the best of planners. So Allah has their path best for them. That is not our, we have to protect our families. We have to protect our women. We have to protect our children. If that means that going to court and getting an order of protection, then that is also Quranically sound, right? You're right. Your job is to make sure that oppression stops, even and especially when that is oppression is against you.
We have a question on the screen. Because each person is a mixture of both religious and national culture, how do you bridge those differences in interpretation of the same teachings?
Well, we are all different, but we also know that we have one religion and one Quran and one prophet, peace be upon him, right? And the whole point of Islam is that we do not translate, we do not change per our cultural opinion. And the beautiful thing is, and this is what we're told in the Quran, right? As different communities, we were brought together to know each other, but within the same ummah, within the same community, right? So our job is to understand each other's cultural understandings and sensibilities, but our deen is deen, and there's no interpretation within deen, right? I know that in reality there sometimes is, but the ideal is, and that's where we work from. We work from, these are the things that are unequivocal. These are the things that we know. We know that oppression is not part of our religion. We know that obligation is not part of our religion, right? That is not the way that we move forward. So I'm not saying that any of these things are easy. We use mental health professionals. We use our Islamic scholars. We use imams. We use everything that we have in our power, but it is our job to transform our communities. We are not waiting for people on the outside to do that. That is our job.
Well, one of the things, many of the African American imams were not invited to the training sessions for imams. And these are men who have gone on to become licensed mediators, etc. Excuse me. How do they gain access? Because it seems like it's a select group.
I don't know about other organizations. I can tell you that Peaceful Families are Imams trainings are open to everyone, and we provide scholarships for those who can. They used to be in person.
Right.
Yeah, probably in this year it will be virtual, but there has never been sort of selection or like specific participation.
So they just need to keep up with the the Peaceful Families website.
Absolutely. And there is our website. You can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. My communications department will come in give me a hard time.
I love that line behind that. Follow us here, there, and the other place.
Exactly. Now we do have we have peaceful parenting points. We have something that's called Marriage Matters. In fact, we have this weekend a Marriage Matters a seminar on the web for individuals who are interested. It's the second in a 3-part series. Mm-hmm. We have a wide variety of opportunities. We also have on our website, we have workbooks. We have a toolkit for imams, and we have a toolkit for domestic violence survivors themselves.
Wonderful. Hey, all of you all out there, she's giving out a lot of information. Please follow, sign up for one of those workshops, learn what it's all about. I know that I'm looking forward to Women's History Month, and I want to insert some serious things on Muslim women. I haven't decided, I guess I better decide quickly, how I'm going to do it, perhaps with a webinar. And with those of you, we had Manal on. Dr. Manal had done a thing on Fatima Mernisi's book, The Veil and the Male Elite, where she had taken out the 4 hijabs. And a number of the women who have corresponded me said, this thing with the scarf, they're bringing it over here. It wasn't here, which is true. And Muslim women did a whole bunch of things, but now all about being a Muslim woman is whether or not you have a scarf on. And so they got out from the Quran the 10 ayat that deal with spiritual hijab. And so I want to put that with face, with peaceful families, with general conversation. So when you see my email, don't run and hide.
Not at all.
I know all of you are very busy. And I've also learned that women-led organizations are not getting the support they should have. They're tackling sensitive issues, critical issues, all kinds of things. But because they're led by women, they don't seem to be getting the support that they need.
What I will say is we are so lucky at Peaceful Families in that we don't have a plethora of our brothers, but we do have some amazing, amazing leaders on our board, in our trainers, and in our advisory board. And what I would say, and I have always said this is a Muslim issue. This is not a Muslim women's issue.
Exactly. And I think that there are a lot of men out there who would wish to support all of these initiatives. It is a matter of them knowing that they're there. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that people know that they're there. And one of the other things is, which is kind of sticky, is women marrying men they don't know. COVID has put them really close to these men they don't know, and they're not given a break because these men are not going to work, which may wind up in issues of anger, unmitigated spaces. What would your recommendation be for them?
Right. And as I said, there is domestic violence, the belief that, and then there's just the uncomfortableness of living with not only a person you don't know, but in many of our cultures where there is a lot more separation between young men and women, like a whole species of people you don't know and don't understand and are not trained on. So one of the things that we do is we do these relationship building webinars. We have curriculum. We are now working on a youth curriculum so that from a very early age, men and women speak the same language about relationships. They understand that, you know, they have tools to be able to work with. From youth to selection of a partner. I think that's also really important. Our communities are picking on all sorts of qualities that are not long-term qualities, right? So maybe it's money, maybe it's the color of your eyes, maybe it's how thin you are, maybe it's, you know, the languages that you speak. None of those things are the qualities for which we should be marrying. We are Muslims. The idea is that we are creating partnerships that are supposed to last forever, which means we need to be looking at character. We need to be looking at lifestyle. We need to be looking at belief systems. We need to be looking at really other kinds of characteristics when we're on those, you know, that search for a partner, and not sort of staying at the surface. So that's number one. We need to pick the right partners. We need to take time. And again, relationships are art and knowledge, right? So we need to know how to manage conflict. We need, in fact, very precisely, that's the talk that we're having this weekend on Marriage Matters is about conflict. We are going to have conflict. We are supposed to have conflict. If we don't have conflict, then we're really in trouble. So the idea is that we have tools to manage conflict in a respectful way, in a way where both partners can be heard, in a way that involves negotiation. And if you look at our early Muslims, how we're told to problem solve is about mutual consultation, right? We talk to each other, we talk to other people around us, and we come to a decision that works best for the most of us, right? And those kinds of things need to be talked about in marriage and in families as well.
And the last thing, because I think you're expert enough to really talk about this, is the cross-cultural marriage, where there's a limited amount of same language. COVID has thrown us into the house together. Speak to us.
I think multicultural marriages are beautiful and amazing and wonderful, but they are work. And you should not invest in one if you are not going to put that work in. And that means loving and respecting where your partner comes from. And that is language, that is culture, that is tradition. Now, that doesn't mean you have to love it all, but you do have to love it, accept it as your family, right? So you love it the same way you love your family, and there are, and build those things. But we've also been given the answer to that in the Quran. The idea is to know each other, right? So we make the effort to learn each other's language. We make the effort to learn how to cook those favorite dishes from each side. We learn and we talk about things, hopefully, inshallah. And I know one of my partners at Peaceful Families, who's an imam who does premarital training, is those things should be talked about before we sign, right? We need to know, what are your ideas about children? How do you believe children should be raised? What are your ideas about education? What are your ideas about, working and shared economics and all of those kinds of things? So the best of that world is that gets discussed beforehand. If it isn't, then you take the time, calmly, and sometimes with outside support, right? It's okay to go to a therapist. It's okay to go to an elder that you both trust within the community. Not to sort of shove your opinion down the other person's throat, but to really have open negotiations, and find the things that you love about their culture and who they are, and learn how to manage the things that are really uncomfortable for you.
That is wonderful advice, and I hope all those that are listening go to this workshop this weekend. I know that you have squeezed us in between a very busy day. So I'm going to give you the last word. What do you want us to know if we don't know anything else?
I think my personal and our as PFP's mission is always to look at how to enrich Muslim lives through family, right? The idea is, and to go into our deen, to go deeply into who we are as a religious tradition, and within that to find our peace. Because when we are living in families based on peace, we can change the world, because we have energy and we have support and we have joy, and we have a mission that we can do together. So for me, it's a win-win-win-win situation.
Well, I can't thank you enough. This is Professor Amina Al-Din, and I've been having, just an enlightening talk with Dr. Berte. I hope you go to Peaceful Families website, learn some more about the workshops, seminars, what they're about, etc. And we will have her back. I'm going to have to put on my roller skates and find her. But we will be back next week, and we'll have a different agenda for you. Thank all of you who are listening very much. Assalamu alaikum and jazakallah.